When mothers put their children to bed at night and they tell them a story, they instinctively know what the child needs to feel satisfied at the end of the story. Otherwise, the child won't go to sleep. They'll say, Mommy, but then what happens? And you can't just say, well, then they moved, and so I don't know, right? You have to satisfy even the child's innate sense of story. Now, I wish it was more complicated than what I'm telling you. I wish that I could say, you know, to really understand a story, you're going to have to spend 35 years like I have doing it. And so when we say we are the master teachers, we have some importance over you. We don't. I've just told you what a story is. It's someone you care about, someone you like. They want something very badly. They'll do almost anything to get it, and they'll either get it in the end or they'll die trying, and that's it. And if you don't do that, you've wasted film. You've wasted everybody's time and talent and money. As directors, it's your job to not fail on any of those levels. So while it's very simple, it's also almost impossible to do it perfectly. Now, I hope I have answered in some degree that question, that simple little question, what is a movie? It's a story. But to me, now, the second most important question is, why make a movie? I mean, what are your goals? And I'm talking to you in the yellow jackets. What are your goals for making a movie? Is it to impress your friends? Oh, yeah, I got into the Rising Star Directors program and I'm special, you know. No. I mean, it can be that. Ain't gonna work. It's not enough. What are your goals as a director and as a writer? Because you're gonna, like I said, have to know what a writer knows to direct. I guess you have to answer the question, well, what do you want? And what do you need? The same question I asked about the character in your movie. It has to have lasting value. It's not about money. If it is, it won't happen for you. Sorry. It would be nice to have an expensive car, beautiful girlfriend. Fame is kind of fun for a while. Hey, it's nice to win an Oscar. That's not a good enough reason. That won't get you an Oscar. The reason you're in it, I hope, is you've got something to say. Now, entertaining people is good. That's fine. I mean, and that's valuable. We all need to be entertained, take us away from our busy lives, you know, the pressures we have. That's good. So entertainment, fine. I mean, you may have loftier goals. You may want to educate people. You know, they need to know something that you know. Usually, it's about getting people to think or feel. Think or feel. That's almost always the goal of the filmmaker, the ones who make it. If you don't have that commitment to it, if part of what you're doing is not to make the world a little bit better, what's the point? Do something else. Don't direct a movie if you don't have something to say. But if you do, fantastic. So this is a very, very almost impossible task for you. You know, you've got to direct a movie. You've got to understand the story. You've got to know the screenplay as well as the screenplay writer. And it's got to mean something, too. Are you up for it? Are you? Good. Because that's what it's going to take to get a rising star. Now, I would like to tell you a little bit about my journey. I was about your age, and I'm kind of looking at you, averaging your ages, not far out of college, when I met a man who was washing dishes in a fancy restaurant where my wife was a waitress. And this man's name was Bill. And he didn't have any hair. And he didn't have many teeth. And he didn't have the ability to read or write. You see, Bill was mentally retarded. And from the time when he was a young boy, he was put in well, they called it a hospital, but it was more like a prison. And his family lost track of him. His parents died. And he spent 44 years in this place. And then in the United States, we changed our laws. And Bill and tens of thousands of people like him were set free. Go. Go. Go live. Get out of here. What skills did Bill have to even survive? He was worse than the man on the bicycle with the boxes we talked about. He had nothing, but he got a dishwasher's job, and boy, was that important. That was more important to Bill than a Rolls Royce would be to that fellow we were talking about earlier. It meant he was somebody. You know, it meant he was needed. He washed dishes. People need dishes washed. I have a job, he said to himself, and I have value. But he was still in a prison in a way because he had nobody in his life. Bill had no one in his life who cared about him. He had nobody to really do anything for. And one night I met him. And you know what he asked me for? Toothpaste. He needed toothpaste. Well, I was young, I had a car, I had money in my pocket. I said, let's go get you some toothpaste, Bill. And so we did. The next day he needed something else, and the next day something else. And before I knew it, Bill was going with me everywhere. And it was easy to have Bill go with me. He was so happy to be in a car. He'd say, look at that, buddy, wow. Oh, that's all the people and a movie theater and a nice tree and birds and, you know, everything was fantastic. And it made me, like, see the trees and the birds and the movie theater as fantastic, too. You know, Bill's starting to get inside of me. So it was easy to be with Bill, and he made me feel good. That's why we became friends. I wasn't trying to do something for Bill. It was how he made me feel, which was better about myself. Bill lived to a ripe old age. One day I sat down and kind of wrote just a story of our journey together, you know? The first time with the toothpaste and then all that. And when I was finished with it, I didn't know what to do with it. I gave it to some friends, and they read it, and they said, oh, that's great, wonderful. Yeah, you really got it, Barry. And then I get a phone call out of the blue from a television network in New York. A friend of a friend of a friend had sent my little 100-page story to someone at this television network, and the next thing I know is they want to make a movie. About Bill? Well, about Bill and Barry. About the friendship. It's really different. And I had to stand back and say, it is really different. And we made that movie, and we had one of the biggest stars in all of American theater history. His name was Mickey Rooney. And at one time in the 1930s, he was a bigger star than Tom Cruise. #1 box office around the world. Now he's an old man. He doesn't have much hair. He doesn't have many teeth. He's perfect to play Bill. Of course, they couldn't find someone handsome enough to play me, but they did all right. They got a fellow named Dennis Quaid, who became a big movie star later. And I'm off to the races. I have a movie now made about my life with Bill, and I'm up for what is called an Emmy Award. It's like the Oscars, but for television. And, you know, lo and behold, Bill and I went to the telecast, and millions of people across the United States and maybe the globe were watching it. We won. You know, we didn't even have a clue as to where this thing would go, and we won. And I woke up the next day, and I had a career. This man with no hair, no teeth, that couldn't read or write, just needed some toothpaste, gave me a career. How cool is that? After Bill died, I decided just to devote 1 week a year volunteering for groups of people who have these kinds of handicaps. And I was at this conference somewhere in Texas when there was a break in the meeting, and I went to get some coffee, and I walked down the hallway, and I heard a sound. It was and I go, what is that? Is that somebody in trouble? Should I call the police, call a doctor? And I looked in the door, and I could see from behind this man reaching for a book off a library shelf, And I said, do you need some help? Or what? I'm reading. Oh, you're reading? Oh, okay, good. What are you reading? I'm just reading. Well, you're reading very fast. Yes, reading very fast. He wasn't just reading. He was reading and memorizing a book. When I say memorizing, I mean memorizing every word on that page. And he was turning the page about every 8 seconds, and he was Rain Man. And I didn't know it. There was no title. There was no story. There was just a guy reading books, memorizing them. Oh, and by the way, I told you 8 seconds. When he wants to go a little faster, he reads the left page with his left eye and the right page with his right eye, and then it only takes him 4 seconds a page. He turns out to be unique in all of creation. There has never been a man with a brain like the man I met when I heard and opened the door. You need to open the door. Maybe not to a Rain Man, but to something else just as wonderful, something else just as marvelous, something else that you can tell the world about. And maybe it's not that unique or special. Maybe it's more common. Maybe it's about just somebody who does something else less, unique, but does it just as well. And your audience will go with you, just as they went with Rain Man in that car ride across the United States with a brother who didn't even like him, who was just trying to get money out of him, until he got to know his brother the way I got to know Bill. And then their foreheads touched at the end. There was no car crashes. There were no guns going off. There was no fireworks at the end of Rain Man. There was just two characters finding each other. And the audience said, that's enough. That's all we need. We like this movie. We learned a lesson. So those two people, Bill and Kim was the Rain Man's real name, gave me a kind of a genre that I would later do all my work in. We call it the underdog story. I don't know if you have a term that's similar to that, but it's somebody who really shouldn't be able to do something, but does. So it's not the action hero. The action hero is supposed to do anything, fight armies, jump off buildings, survive helicopter crashes. But the underdog, he's that guy on the bicycle who picks up the boxes and goes home. And somehow we find that to be enough to complete the story and to feel satisfied. When I started writing screenplays, I didn't have even one screenplay book. And I guess there was really only one you could buy at that time. Now there's hundreds of screenwriting books, courses you can take, and seminars and all the rest of it. I found a couple of scripts that I was able to look at and kind of figure out how to do it from that, but you know what? They were bad scripts. So when I started writing, I was writing bad scripts because I didn't have, a master plan. I didn't have an education. I didn't have a foundation for the writing. I hope that what I've given you today is a little bit of that foundation. Most of it you're going to have to find out on your own. Like I said, there's lots and lots of books. Now, I've taken most of what I've learned and what I've talked about today from two sources. One is Aristotle. He was a Greek philosopher who wrote a book called Poetics. And that was the first attempt to describe what a drama is. Very similar to the question posed to me today, what is a movie? And what Aristotle wrote thousands of years ago is valid today. About 90% of it will apply to your movie. About 90% of it is what I was telling you today. The other contemporary writer is a fellow, an American by the name of Robert McKee, who I hope they have translated, his books into Chinese, because that would be the one I recommend. You should buy it, read it, and memorize it. That becomes your Bible. Lastly, I want to tell you a little story that happened to me when I was a boy that sort of gave me my worldview and what makes me write what I do. I was going with my father, we were driving in his car, to our church, and there was a father and son dinner at the church. So we both had our suits on, our coats, and it was rainy and it was dark, and we went through a neighborhood where the car in front of us stepped on their brakes really fast, and then I saw the dog run in front of the car, and I heard the sound of the dog. And my dad stopped the car. But the man who hit the dog kept going. And then I saw a boy come out of the store. He came running out. And he cried. It was his dog. And he was just about, my age, my size. He was black. He was a black American, African American. But that doesn't matter. He was a boy. He was a boy my age. And I saw my father get out of the car with a blanket and pick the dog up and put it in the car. And then he picked up the boy and put him in the car. And then we drove to the boy's house. And on the way, the dog died. And then my dad took the boy and the dog into the house. And I stayed in the car. So, I don't know what went on for 5 or 10 minutes. But when my dad came out, his suit was all full of blood from the dog. And then we drove to church. And we went to the father-son dinner. And then we came home. And I learned everything I needed to ever know about my father that night. And I learned everything I needed to know about life that night. And so that's why I do the underdog story. That's why it has to matter to me. It has to care. I have to care. It has to be about something. You need to tap into your experiences. It took years for me to really remember that and to be able to share it with you. Because I'm trying to figure out, they say, come here, share my ideas, share my talents. I'm sweaty? Oh, I'm tearful, yes. Well, I figured it out. I'm a screenwriter because I'm just trying to live up to the standard that my father taught me. And you need a standard. It doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be as dramatic. You have to have a standard. You have to do this for somebody or something other than yourself. Now, I want to take some questions. And I don't want to pick the people who are going to ask the questions because then I'm going to make somebody mad. So I've asked you to do that for me, haven't I? Thank you, John.
提问时间，大家可以提问了。
By the way, while he's doing that, what's really cool about being up here and stuff, aside from, being in China, being in Beijing and all that, it's fun to be called a master of anything. We've been sort of described as the 8, masters. This is where it's going to come? Okay. And I didn't feel that way really until they told me how much you needed us. That you really did need us. And then I really felt good about this. And it's kind of cool to be up here, with a microphone and all that. Okay, now, so I listen here, right? Okay.
莫伦老师你好，据我觉得中国现在有许多电影是翻拍以前的小说或者是过去的故事，你觉得这样一个现象你会有什么意见？觉不觉得是个恶性的循环？还有刚才你说就是狗与人之间一些纯粹的感情，在我看来国外有很多电影很感动人心，我看了每看一次都会流泪。据我现在了解，中国没有这样一部电影，关于狗和人之间能让你看哭的电影。我很希望拍这样的电影，就你觉得有什么样的意见？好，谢谢。
Thank you. It's a two-part question. The first had to do with remakes and sequels, and how did I feel about that? And the second was an observation that in China there are not a lot of movies that have to do with relationships, like say a man and a dog, or animals, I guess. And of course, culturally, we all, in the U.S., dogs, for a lot of people, are their children, are their companions. They have elevated status that's not shared around the world. So I do understand that. We project onto the animal human characteristics. That's why a movie like Shrek, he's not an animal. I don't know what he is, an ogre or something, It's why that works as a movie. Or I don't know if you saw the movie Babe the Pig. It's a pig, and you care, you care about the pig as much as you do Tom Cruise, maybe more. I'm not telling you what are sources for movies to be done here. That's up to you guys. But that's a part of also now, if you're going to tell stories that have universal application, that you want to have distribution around the world, then let's, make certain that you find a story that is universal. That's not just specific to, one country or the other. Now, regarding the sequels and remakes, well, sometimes it's warranted, but only really if you can make it better than the first one. And that's rarely done. in terms of remakes. Usually it's an attempt to cash in on something that was successful 20 years ago, and let's do it again. And you know, I have no reason to you know, get on a soapbox and say that's wrong, because the people who run studios and invest in movies are doing it to make money. Okay, let's be clear. They're not all artists. They're not all going to cry about my story of the dog. You know, unless it makes them money, then they'll cry with joy. And so there's a business. It's called show business. And artists shouldn't really ever forget that, because it's just reality. Sequels have really kind of hurt things, in my opinion. And here's what's wrong with the sequel. Remember I said you have to have a satisfying ending? Well, if it's a sequel, that means it didn't really end. That means, oh, well, let's just pick it up where it was and just keep going. So there's something essentially inherently flawed about the concept of a sequel. Unless it's my sequel, and you know, then it's great. You know, but anyway, I haven't done a sequel.
Lao师您好，看过《雨人》之后呢，很多的时候，第一次看完之后，我会觉得是达斯汀·霍夫曼，完善了这部电影，完美了这部电影。我想问您，如果今天换成了罗宾·威廉姆斯，或者换成了另外一个演员，您还对您的这个剧本有信心吗？包括拿这个小金人儿。谢谢。
That's a good question, because when we started the journey to Rain Man, which was fraught with its own kind of drama and trials and tribulations, what we really had on our side was Dustin Hoffman. He was the first person to really look at it, read it, and commit to it. But I can tell you a little story that I don't think anybody else knows. When it was first sent, it was sent the same night to two people, Dustin Hoffman and Bill Murray. Now, I don't know if you know who Bill Murray is. I know you've seen him. Lost in Translation, Caddyshack, Groundhog Day, Ghostbusters. He's a comedian. Generally, he's a comedian, but he's done some dramatic movies too. And it was sent to both of these men the same night by this, they were represented by the same agent, an agency. And Dustin Hoffman's very businesslike, and he read the script immediately, and phoned in and said, I want to do it, but I want to play the character of Raymond Babbitt. And they said, oh, cool, great. Bill Murray didn't read it for a while, and I don't know if he ever really did, but it was originally intended to be sent to Bill Murray to play Raymond, and Dustin Hoffman to play the Tom Cruise role. The reason I know this is because my agent, who was with the same agency, told me some years later that he got a phone call in the middle of the night from the head of the agency and said, we sent the scripts to Dustin and to Bill Murray today, right? He said, yes. He said, well, Dustin has called, he wants to do it. Did you put on the letter which part we were asking them to read for? And he said, I don't remember. He said, go to the office and find out. So this fellow had to get out of bed, drive across town, go to this big building, have the security let them in, go up to the office floor, go into the file cabinet, take the letter out, and called and said, no, we didn't say which one was for which. And they said, great, we've got Rain Man. Now we just have to find his brother, Charlie Babbitt. And that took over a year. At the time, Tom Cruise was not the big star that he's become. In fact, the movie that he had done just prior to Rain Man was a movie called Cocktail. He played a bartender and flipping the bottles, and you know, not the most important movie that was ever made, right? And he's young. He's 25 years old, and Dustin Hoffman is 50 years old. And I'm thinking, this isn't going to work. Nobody's going to believe they're brothers. I mean, the age difference is crazy. This just goes to show that even the master teacher can be wrong. I was wrong. When you see that scene where they're coming down the escalator in their matching suits, brothers, they look alike. You know, they don't look alike, but they look alike. Because what the audience has done, see, audiences are amazing. Just like they can hook into like that man on the bicycle who's nobody and care about him, you know, they can hook into this story about these two brothers and suspend any disbelief they have that there's 25 years between the two of them. Movies are magical when you do it right. Magic just happens. Next question.